Hello friends, Nayaswami Riman here with my last installment from Lesson 9 of the Super Advanced course of Yogananda's. And I'm going to continue with greed and possibly, if time allows, failure. So again, to repeat as I did a week or so ago, this is taken from the Super Advanced course number 1. And here he's talking about overcoming greed. Now, generally it seems that when Yogananda would talk about greed, he included food greed, meaning overeating, which I don't know that America was particularly overweight back in the 1920s and 30s, but as a population and a culture, it was certainly going that direction even then, more so now, post-World War II. But another element is failure, and this was during the 1930s Great Depression, and failure was as common as clouds in Seattle. So he addressed failure quite a bit. So let's see what he says. I'll start with greed here. Remember, you eat to live, but do not live to eat. Well, I'm not so sure about that. Eating problems aren't just limited to teenagers, of course, but I think of all the fast food eating that has arisen since Yogananda's lifetime. He passed in 1952. I remember my first fast food place in maybe the late 50s, early 60s that I was aware of in my little town was a Foster's Freeze. And boy, was that red hot stuff, those little hamburgers and milkshakes. Greed is the servant of the palate and the enemy of digestion and health. Yogananda would say to audiences back in those days when he was barnstorming the country that you don't know what a rattlesnake you carry in your colon. Yogis actually know there's a term for it. They actually used to be able to pull their colon out, imagine, and wash it in the river or something like that. Strange things that yogis do. But, the health of the digestive system is, of course, well known and causes, constipation, all sorts of issues, colon cancer. A clean and good diet with weekly juice fasts and monthly 3-day juice fasts, and even longer ones once in a while, which Yogananda recommended in other of his lessons, are strongly encouraged, but not the sort of water-type total fasts. Most people are not, wouldn't do well with that kind of a fast. Too many toxins get released. Okay, let's see. He would talk about the importance of good chewing. In fact, even though I'm a lover of smoothies, Yogananda, even his time, pointed out that much of the nutrition that we get, as well as good digestion, comes from the beginning point of beginning to chew our food, releases the various digestive juices. And studies on smoothies have shown what a high number of calories sometimes end up in those smoothies and gain a lot of weight. Self-control protects your health. The purpose of self-restraint is the conservation of health, though wholesome food need not be and should not be unpalatable. Eat often, eat less. Think of your health and digestion, and do not concentrate on your likes if you want to conquer greed. Then he goes on in greed for possessions. He was a champion against the installment method of the 1920s and 30s, by which people got in debt and went into bankruptcy. And the anxiety and stress over debt was already a big problem in his day. Concentrating on your needs is an antidote for the insatiable greed for money or possessions. The noble ambition to acquire wealth in order to aid worthy causes is not greed, for it is not insatiable. It is always satisfied when it can help others. Isn't that interesting? I can add to his testimony that in my lifetime of living in communities, how many yogis, sadly, I have known who have filed bankruptcy because of credit card debt specifically. We have such a culture that encourages easy acquisition and a just nonstop, cell phones and all sorts of devices and computers and electronics that we can buy to make us happier and more efficient. So it's very much an issue. The only thing I can say in defense of all of that is that we're at least very conscious of our possessiveness, our acquisitiveness. So we're on the cusp as a culture to do something about it and to live more simply, as I think nature will force upon us. In any case, I can't say the same when it comes to other issues of self-indulgence, which I'm not going to discuss. Okay, so I want to move on to overcoming failure, and which was a big thing back in his time. He writes, 3 out of 4 businessmen in America fail. First, because they choose a wrong vocation. Next, because they give up too quickly. And last, because their products lack quality. American greediness and consumerism has spawned cheap products and the desire for cheap but worthless products. And thus it is that earlier in my life, Japan first, and then in later years, China, fed the greed for cheap products by making cheap products. And Swami Kriyananda, in looking ahead in this age, said the time will come when we'll put a greater emphasis on quality clothes and quality products that last, that aren't just throwaway. And I don't know that we've gotten there yet, but I think what he said is really true. And also, I don't think he talks about it here, but I know Swami Kriyananda talked about how American businessmen need to think in long term, not just short term quick profits. And this would be true of investing as well as in business. Think of the long term, the sustainable term. Think of the needs of your customers and so forth, and how you can make a quality product or render a good service that you can be proud of and they can be benefited by. Anyway, so he goes on, he talks about, and that now he's getting more into psychology, the psychology of failure. An inferiority complex is born of contact with weak-minded people and a weak innate subconscious mind. A superiority complex results from false pride and inflated ego. But both inferiority and superiority are destructive to self-development, and both are manifestations of the ego. Both are fostered by imagination, ignoring facts, while neither belongs to the true, all-powerful, conquering nature of the soul. Okay? Develop true self-confidence by conquering weakness. Base your self-confidence on actual achievements, and you will be free from inferiority or superiority complexes. I remember that being very helpful in my life back when Swami Kriyananda was inviting me and Padma and people of our generation more and more into serving publicly, teaching, counseling, ministry, and so on. There was a tendency to feel, after all, he was our teacher, and who could possibly compare himself favorably, if you will, to Swami Kriyananda, who was a veritable genius and with deep, deep attunement to Paramhansa Yogananda. So, in fear, but I remember, therefore, Swami Kriyananda quoting to us all at that time when we were in training, that quoting Yogananda and saying inferiority complex is just as much ego as superiority complex. It's a false humility. True humility, he would say, is self-forgetfulness, knowing that with God's power, anything is possible. And when God is the doer, when we act in attunement with the divine will and with the divine power, then anything can be accomplished by us. And so failure is born of the ego, and so is the cheap kind of success of which the rooster ego crows. And so true karma yoga, nishkam karma, acting without desire for the fruits, without thought of self, but as an instrument of the true doer of all actions, good, bad, or indifferent, big or small. Okay, great souls, that's it for today. I think I'll be done then with a couple of these broadcasts using the Super Advanced Course number 1. Joy to you.